take over. The biggest problem there, I think, where we need to start is we got to get rid of the ambassador. She's still left over from the Clinton administration.
What, the ambassador?
It doesn't sound like he's basically walking around telling everybody, wait, he's going to get impeached, just wait. I mean, get rid of her. Hooray. Get her out to the get her out. Take her out. Okay? Do it.
President Trump back in April 2018 saying take out the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch. Of course, a year later, she was fired from her post. He was talking there to Lev Parnas. You may remember he's the associate of Rudy Giuliani, who's been indicted by the Southern District of New York. That new tape came out just this week in the middle of the Senate impeachment trial. We want to talk about the trial right now with conservative columnist Jonah Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Dispatch, Democrat Roland Martin from Roland Martin Unfiltered.
I'm not a Democrat.
You're not a Democrat?
No, I'm a regular brother.
We'll call you a Democrat-leaning independent brother, okay. Republican strategist and political analyst Alice Stewart, and our senior national correspondent Terry Moran.
I'm a Republican, for the record.
You are a Republican.
I used to be.
Terry, let's start out assessing where we are after 5 days of arguments.
You know, looking at it, it is a classic circumstantial evidence case, right? The Democrats come and they make a very meticulous, well-organized, and strong narrative argument that requires a leap to the conclusion that they did in their arguments. That if you look at all this evidence around President Trump, he did this and it warrants removal from office. And the Republicans, like any defense lawyer in trials across the country every single day, stand up and say, where's the direct evidence? That you have to make that conclusion, you have to make that leap. And that does raise the question, you know, was it the right choice at the end of the day for the Democrats to decide to go with this evidence, go with the impeachment you have, rather than fight, as they're now asking the Senate to do, for the people who could say, I was in the room, President Trump turned to me and said that money's not going to Ukraine unless they go after the Biden.
Mick Mulvaney, John Bolton.
Donald Trump said, I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, my folks wouldn't care. It doesn't matter what the Democrats present. It doesn't matter if they run 30 people who were actually in the room. Republicans are not going to vote against him because they are deathly afraid of this man. They are scared to death. These are grown men and women who are behaving like children, and so they're getting everything that they want from him, and they will suck it up and tolerate anything. So they will never vote against Donald Trump. So Democrats are doing the best they can do, but it doesn't matter.
And Brittany, let me read this to you, Alice Stewart, because it does appear that the positions on the Republican side hardened against witnesses this week, calling the witnesses this week. What about the argument you saw from Adam Schiff towards the end there, said, well, you know what, the truth's going to come out at some point anyway?
Well, it should have come out in the House impeachment proceedings if there was more information to come out. And to Terry's point, the House information and their vote to impeach is based on a lot of presumption of wrongdoing and not actual facts and evidence on wrongdoing. If this was such an overwhelming slam dunk case for impeachment, they wouldn't be asking for more information and more witnesses and more testimony. If they needed more information, they shouldn't have gone forth with the articles for impeachment. So that's where I think they have a very difficult time going forward with trying to get a conviction in the Senate and ultimately removal from office. And this is going to make it easier for the White House counsel to say, you have not proven your case, this is not enough to go for impeachment, and this is nothing more than a political ploy to overturn the past election and influence the next one.
But, Jonah, they did put forward, you know, voluminous evidence that there was a scheme going on for several months. Rudy Giuliani was at the center of it, and they showed often the president right there in public calling for these investigations.
Yeah, so when Terry says you have to leap to the conclusion that he did it, I think it's more like a very small hop. Because I think it's been obvious, the basic facts have been obvious since he released the transcript. That's one of the problems the Democrats have, is when they released the transcript, that was sort of like releasing the 18-minute tape from Watergate at the beginning of the process. And people have priced it in. It's given them, the White House, a chance to defend it. At the end of the day, the White House team did much better than I thought it would. And what they understand is that they just need to give Republican senators enough permission to stay with the president that they need. And they understood the jury much better, I think, than the Democrats did. And so now they're in this bizarre. Look, on the merits,
their jury. It's Republican.
of course, but on the merits,
jury.
Well, but I know, but that's the way the system is set up is that the Senate is supposed to be a political body in this and have political judgment, and it's not legal judgment. Still, the Republicans are in a very strange place where they are saying, in effect, there's nothing new here, and Lord, hear our prayer. We won't hear anything new, and that's why they don't want witnesses.
George, you asked Senator Langford. He would not say yes. A president should not ask a foreign entity for help. He could not even say it. That right there explains everything about the Republican Party. Plus, we got to remember, this is the third time a president's been impeached. No president has ever been convicted.
But there are
so there was no shock.
There's a lot of folks on the Republican side, myself included, that look at the call. In my view, it was inappropriate, some of what he said, but it was not worthy of impeachment. And that's where we have to get to the point to where we can certainly see where something might not have been said, but it's not grounds for impeachment. What should be the consequences for that? Some are talking censure. But if there was something wrong and he deserves some kind of consequence for that, the voters will decide.
You just said it very, very plainly. And at the beginning of this process, back in September of last year, when the evidence first came out, you did have several Republicans saying if a lot of evidence comes up that the president did indeed condition the aid or was soliciting foreign interference, we should say it was wrong. But Tamara, that has completely shifted over the last several months.
It has, in part because of a very aggressive defense by the president and the very high bar that the public has for removing a president in this way. But that evidence is still coming in. We just played Lev Parnas. If Rachel Maddow can get Lev Parnas, why didn't Adam Schiff? And the nightmare scenario for the country is that over the next several years, in dribs and drabs, in tell-all memoirs and blockbuster interviews and foreign leaks and FOIA documents, a lot more damning evidence is going to come out. And that is the fault of both parties playing a game with the impeachment process.
Listen, I tend to think you may be right that they maybe should have tried harder in the courts, but there's also an awful lot of evidence on the other side. You can take the tax cases led by the House Ways and Means Committee, filed last April, not even considered yet in the district court.
There you go.
And why courts would respond.
Why didn't Adam
They haven't been responding.
Why didn't Adam Schiff go after John Bolton if he wanted to hear from him? The House did not need an engraved invitation to issue a subpoena to John Bolton. They could have done that.
He did, and he said he wouldn't comply.
How about if you're a patriot, you actually say what's best for the country? How about that? All the folks who wave the flag and they hug the flag and talk about what it means to be an American, talk about the founding fathers, how about that? Why do you have to be forced or compelled by a court order to actually step forward and say, this is actually what happened, this was wrong by the President of the United States? But they won't do it because they all have their own interests as a Republican Party.
Jonah Goldberg, we are going to hear from John Bolton probably before the election. He's got a book coming out, whether he's subpoenaed by the House, whether the Senate votes for it as well. At the end of the day, what's your guess on what that story is?
Well, I mean, this is one of the reasons why you want to have him under oath, because under oath, John Bolton, I know John, he's not going to lie. He's a very careful lawyer. He takes an enormous number of notes. But under oath, you have to tell the story in all of its inconvenient ways. In a book, he can tell the story any version that he wants. And I think that is a problem for history. I think it's a problem. It's certainly a problem for the Democrats. I think it's why the Democrats made a big mistake not going to the mattresses trying to get him to testify. And if the Republicans were truly interested in fact-finding, they would call him as a witness. But they're clearly not. And
nope.
And so we're going to get his version of events, but it's not going to be the same version you would get, I would suspect, if he testified under oath.
And that gets to the question of will the House and will it matter if they subpoena John Bolton after a likely acquittal?
Well, then you're going to, what, take another bite at the apple? You're going to have another impeachment if his evidence is damning enough? This was the process. And this question of maybe the Senate could call witnesses, I'm not sure how that solves the problem. This was always going to have to be a fight in the courts. Every president would have the right and, in fact, the duty to, if the chief of staff and national security advisor were subpoenaed, to at least test the boundaries. At least test the boundaries.
Constitutionally, I disagree with that the courts would get in the way. The Senate is at the height of its powers during impeachment. Yes. Chief Justice Roberts could rule on it right there.
No, no way.
He won't, but he could.
Even been awake?
I don't know that the Supreme Court wants to get in the middle of this question. There are lots of things that the Supreme Court just will not weigh in on. And when the Senate called for a witness, I very much doubt the Supreme Court would go, whoa, 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 hold on, we have to sign off on that. That's not in the Constitution.
But I do think it's important also, if we're going to talk about bringing in John Bolton and other witnesses that the Democrats want, what the White House counsel pointed out yesterday is important. If we're going to hear additional information from Republicans, let's hear from some of the Democrats. Let's hear from Joe Biden, Hunter Biden. Even Adam Schiff has important information concerning the whistleblower. So if we're going to open up the door for additional information and testimony, it should go on both sides.
And we're going to hear a lot more.
On the call? Were they on the call with the president of Ukraine?
He was certainly the
Were they on the
emphasis
call?
for he was certainly the emphasis for the president's request.
So you want to hear from the people who were not on the call, had nothing to do with the call, but you want to have them testify as opposed to the person who withheld the aid to Ukraine?
If certainly he is the motivation for what the Democrats are saying the president was seeking, he certainly should be on the call.
Well, just throw Chelsea in there. I mean, we want to start throwing people in there. He was not on the call.
And we're going to probably hear a lot more from the president's team about Joe Biden tomorrow as he's running for president. I do